Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Think Before You Hate podcast, where we'll discuss the latest topics on civil rights concerning the people of Chicago. I'm Alex of the Chicago Commission on Human Relations, and we're the city's civil rights agency. What we do is we fight prejudice and discrimination here in Chicago by enforcing the city's human rights ordinance as well as the Chicago Fair Housing Ordinance. And today we have the great pleasure of speaking with Shannon Lynn Parker, the new CEO of Equality Illinois. Shannon, thank you very much for joining us today on the Think Before You Hate podcast. And to kick us off, will you please tell me a little bit about yourself? Where'd you grow up and what led you to become the new CEO of Equality Illinois?
Oh, God, I ask myself that often. No. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure.
As you said, my name is Shannon Lynn Parker. Where did I grow up at? My goodness, I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago, actually. My family, we are originally Southerners from Louisiana. But, I have spent a large portion of my life in the suburbs and, within the past a little over 10 or so years have been a South Sider of Chicago, Hyde Park area. So that's me. What led me to Equality Illinois? Goodness gracious. I think we have to ask the universe that. I don't know. I've done advocacy work for a long time in many sectors, starting off in academia at the University of Chicago. And my trajectory took me through supporting many marginalized populations, which included young people, young people experiencing homelessness. I used to work in the Cook County Jail, and I suddenly became kind of enmeshed in a vulnerable population with the LGBTQ community. And my most recent job was at Brace Based Alliance, being their CEO. And I was encouraged to throw my hat in the ring for Equality Illinois. And lo and behold, while I had a mouthful of toothpaste in my mouth, brushing my teeth, I got the call saying, "You got the job for Equality Illinois." And I said, "Get out of here." And here I am. I'm ready to do the work.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on
Thank
the
you.
offer and taking on
Thank
such
you.
a role. Now, will you please define what it means to be trans? What are some common misconceptions?
God, what a loaded question. I think that it depends on, it is as vast as every individual that you meet who bears that identity. Personally, I look forward to the day where that is a terribly uneventful identity. Reason being is because I think that when we put a lot of emphasis on the identity, it takes away from the broader humanity, the more mundane things like grocery shopping, being a neighbor. I oftentimes say that there's so many exciting things about me outside of, the lens of identity. However, what it means to me is that you have the right to exist in the way that most feels aligned with your internal reality. You have a right to navigate this world unharmed and unfettered, and you have the right to access a good and productive life, just like everybody else, So in short, that's the best way I can respond to that.
No, that definitely makes sense. I mean, you just want the right to be just another human and not be like caught up in identity and just be, "Hi, I'm another human being. I'm just like you. I go to the grocery store. I don't know what to do."
And it is a shame that these, what I consider to be, I hate to say it, such elementary conversations have to just take, front and center and precedence all the time. What would I want individuals to know? Just you summed it up beautifully, right? Like a person. Like everyone else. Man, I think that there are some far more disagreeable components about myself other than, identity portions. But nonetheless, who we are is deeply important.
Right.
And again, to me, the takeaway I will want our viewers or listeners to hear is, we're people. We are people, and we want to navigate and champion for the rights and humanity of others the same way we would want others to champion for our rights and humanity as well.
Sure. Perfect. I mean, everything you said just makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's just you want to live in a world society where everything isn't caught up with your identity. It's just the water is wet, the sky is blue, and I am trans. The end.
That's kind of it. Yeah, pretty much.
Now, what moments or movements in Chicago's history do you think are under-recognized when it comes to trans rights and activism?
That's a great question. So a lot of times when we think about trans rights and activism, the first thing we go to is Stonewall, which was very pivotal, very, very important. But there were bar protests in the late 1960s where trans women and gender nonconforming folks resisted police harassment. We think about there was 1961, the Dewey's lunch counter protests, right? So those were things that rarely get mentioned in LGBTQ histories, but also to Black and Latino leaders, particularly on the South and West sides, have been championing for their communities long before there were organizations or formal rights or causes. And that was also done through the house and ballroom community, right? Those communities served as chosen family, as mutual aid hubs, HIV prevention, and so many other things. So I think just like any marginalized community, we've always banded together before there were formal structures to support folks the way that we see now.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Now, how have Chicago's neighborhoods or institutions shaped the development of trans communities over the decades?
So I think about, the low-hanging fruit is to say, let's think about the North Side, Boys Town, what was formerly called Boys Town, North Halsted, Lakeview, being able to have access to a safe space, nightlife. Some of our first trans-affirming bars were on that side of town. But even before then, we think about Bronzeville, which a lot of people forget was very LGBTQ safe and friendly way back in the 40s and in the 50s and things like that.
I never mentioned to you, but I'm originally from Connecticut. I've only been in Chicago for about 3 years now, so I'm learning a lot right now.
Sure. So, our neighborhoods have always served as cultural hubs for communities when they were developing and growing strong. Our cultural hubs, our neighborhoods and our communities is what incubated our political action. It's what gave rise to our elected officials, our activations, our rallying, and so much more. So you'd be hard-pressed to find any type of activation that wasn't first nestled inside of some community and received support from individuals within those networks.
Yeah. That makes sense. Now, what kinds of protections, like legal or community-driven, do you feel are still missing for trans people facing violence in the city?
I always love that question, and the reason why is because, we're seeing right now in the current administration a lot of rights being rolled back, and that's just across the board, not just for trans people, but just broadly speaking. But since we're on the topic about trans people, in many ways, there have been efforts to protect the rights and the lives of trans folks. However, we know that what is on paper and what is in practice are two different things.
Right.
So, yes, right, like Illinois is a magical blue island that we fight hard to keep safe.
Right.
And we know that cities like Evanston passed first transgender protection laws even in the country. But nonetheless, though discrimination might be illegal, so to speak, it still doesn't insulate you from the bias, let's say, of someone who you are trying to get a job from. It doesn't protect you from, somebody actively choosing to deny you health coverage, healthcare coverage, I should say. Let's say you're in need of medical supports, housing supports, things like that. So, again, I think that what is missing is the muscle of accountability, right? So we have laid out laws and protections as well as we can. I know Equality Illinois has definitely been at the forefront of a lot of those battles, but nonetheless, right, like I say, is that that doesn't necessarily stop individuals on an individual level from participating in harm that legislation cannot necessarily protect from.
Right. Now that you mentioned healthcare, what systemic barriers do trans people face in Chicago when trying to receive a competent affirming healthcare?
I think just what you just said, competent affirming healthcare, right?
Just one word.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. You just said it right there, right? Like, there isn't, to my knowledge, much of a curriculum when it comes to providers having access to how to treat trans bodies. Oftentimes we go from one extreme to another, right? You come in, God forbid you're just not feeling well. First thing a person jumps to is something catastrophic. And it's like, no, how about I just have asthma? I
just have a cold.
I have a cold, right?
Allergies.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So typically what has happened in the trans healthcare sphere is that we become very HIV focused, hyper-focused.
Okay.
And maybe you get some providers who are a bit more versed in hormone therapy. But the rest, all the myriad of human issues that you come across get forgotten somehow. We have heart attacks. We have strokes. We have diabetes. We have healthcare issues like everybody else. And again, I know that the listener is just like, why would that be so... Why would folks seem to miss that? And I'm as befuddled as you, listener, right? I agree.
Yeah.
But for some odd reason, we've grown so fixated on helping trans folks and non-binary folks know what their CD4 counts are or their viral loads that we forget they also have an LDL and an HDL and an A1C and all these other things. So I think that what's happening is we have woefully become so fixated on one section of a trans person's health identity that we forget to approach things from a holistic standpoint. And of course, I could also mention again, discrimination in systems, just like I brought up before, lack of cultural competence or even lack of cultural humility and things like that. But again, I think that the biggest issue is not taking into consideration the whole person.
Wow. It sounds like we could do a whole episode on just this.
No, go figure.
Yeah. That's really surprising. I didn't really know too much myself about the obstacles that trans people encounter when it comes to affirming healthcare. Now, looking ahead, what do you believe are the next critical steps needed to advance equitable and safe well-being for the trans community in Chicago and beyond?
Enshrining laws that absolutely protect our rights, our civil rights. As I mentioned earlier, this is an administration that from the very beginning, even before, built their campaign and their successes on misinformation. So one, we need to combat misinformation. We need to combat it fervently and feverishly, I would say. Two, we need to apply pressure to our legislators to remember that this population deserves your protection because this is a population that votes. This is a population that navigates Illinois just like everybody else, and we are your constituents, and we deserve to reap the benefits of the protections of this state. Again, I would also say that we need sound policies that, again, protect our rights, our lives. We know that with gender-affirming care, particularly for minors being attacked, that leaves a huge hole in the protections and care of folks. We know that with insurance and other forms of coverage seeming to be rolled back, we expect there to be the potential deaths of folks that could have been completely preventable. So there's so many things here that we need to kind of remain vigilant about right now.
Well, all right. And above all that, as you mentioned earlier, like, you just want to be accepted as human like everyone else. Like, this topic would be, you want to be mundane in a positive way.
Right. Exactly, in a positive way.
Right. Now, this is, as we're wrapping up our conversation, this is a question I ask all of our guests. In your opinion, what can our listeners do in their everyday lives to combat hate and discrimination?
Combat misinformation. That's it. Challenge the assumptions that you yourselves have. I think sometimes we oftentimes look external to ourselves, but I think sometimes we have to look inward, because here's the thing: we all hold internal biases. We all hold imageries of stereotypes. We all do. Me too. So we have to challenge those assumptions. We have to challenge those biases. Even when we think those assumptions or biases, well, let me say assumptions, those assumptions come from a good place, right? Sometimes we have to challenge those assumptions and ask ourselves, wait a minute, am I being patronizing? Am I slipping into saviorism? Am I infantilizing this person based off of my own guilt? Even.
Am I pitying this person?
Right, exactly. Okay. And oh my goodness, there is nothing more annoying than someone who is extremely well-meaning, but wants to come in on their horse and save the day and be this hyper ally. And it's just like, okay, calm down. Right? Like, I calm down. I've got this. I'm still an adult. And I think that is a huge thing that we oftentimes feels like nails on a chalkboard, but going back to your question, interrupt violence. And when I say violence, I don't necessarily mean the physical form, right? The joke that is inappropriate, but you kind of laugh at anyway because you just don't want to be awkward. No, make it awkward. Make that person feel like, okay, I shouldn't have said that, right? Have the hard conversations, but again, yes, with others, but have them with yourselves. Yeah, have them with yourselves and ask yourselves, where did these things come from? How can I unpack them and how can I unlearn them and do better? Because I do not believe, personally, in my opinion, that we can learn while walking on eggshells, okay? So I do believe that we will oops and we will ouch, but for me, being the consummate teacher, I want to challenge folks to get it right. I'm here to help facilitate your learning, but it is your responsibility to maintain that and do the research for yourself as well.
Right. No, I really love that answer. I love asking this question because, this is obviously a civil rights podcast, and everyone has their own opinion, as you would know, on how to fight discrimination. But I love that answer. It's really like bold and blunt, if you will. It's fight misinformation, question others, and most importantly, question yourself.
That's right.
I love that answer. Well, Shannon, thank you very much for hopping on our podcast today. This is a really interesting conversation. I wish I could continue with this conversation, but for every episode, I like to have a constrained amount of time to give like a brief synopsis on the trans experience here in Chicago, and I really found your information really insightful. So thank you very much for hopping on today. And thank you very much for all of our listeners for joining us in the Think Before You Hate podcast. Remember, if you or anybody you know feels that they've been a victim of discrimination, please do not hesitate to contact the Chicago Commission on Human Relations at 312-744-4111. Again, that is 312-711. We are on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Instagram. And one thing I wanted to ask you as we're wrapping up, is there a way you suggest people can reach out to Equality Illinois?
Absolutely. You can go to our website at equalityillinois.org. or you can reach out to me directly at shannon@eqil.org.
Yeah, beautiful. Is there anything else that you wanted to add today?
I think that it is very hard to hate up close. One of the things that this current landscape is interested in is you not having access to get up close with your neighbors.
Right.
Because they know once you get up close with your neighbors, you're going to see the mirror that reflects your own humanity. And that's the reality of it, is that the more we can keep you divided, the more we can keep you thinking that it's them and not the big them up there, then you'll continue to turn your attention and your anger towards the wrong people. You know, so we all have more in common than the handful of folks who are causing all of this dissension. So again, I would encourage you to learn your neighbors, learn your community, find out from them firsthand, because you may be very surprised at how much of yourselves you see in those individuals.
Well said. I definitely agree. And on that note, remember, until next time, think before you hate.
Thank you.